right into our presentations, and our guests will introduce themselves as they begin. First, we have Ms. Rebecca Thompson. She is the Senior Director of Engagement for United Way of Southeastern Michigan, and she will be updating us on our foreclosure project. So I will turn the podium over to Rebecca, and when you need me to switch, just tell me.
So actually, I'm going to come out here. Good morning. As Camelia mentioned, my name is Rebecca Thompson. I'm the Senior Director of Engagement at the United Way in Southeastern Michigan. It's good to see so many familiar faces today. So I have been spending the last few months working on a project that is near and dear to my heart, and I would imagine is yours as well. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the City of Detroit and Wayne County overall is facing severe foreclosure crisis, unlike anything that we've probably ever seen before. And so for a little bit of context to help you wrap your mind around this issue, from 2008 to 2013, we had about 40,000 tax foreclosures in the city of Detroit in total, okay? I'm gonna repeat that. 2008, 2013, we had over 40,000 homes subject to foreclosure for taxes, back taxes. In 2015 alone, we have over 62,000 homes in the city of Detroit that are subject to foreclosure for back taxes. And so this is unprecedented. As I said, it's something that most folks just don't know what to do with. But the thing that scares me the most is that people don't even know that this is happening. And so I wanted to make sure that I could share some information with you about not only the enormity of this crisis, where it's impacting the city, but also how you can help. So, next slide, maybe, or I'll do myself. So, as I mentioned, there are over 62,000 homes in the city of Detroit alone that are at risk of foreclosure. Over 37,000 of those homes are potentially occupied. And there are over 100,000 folks living in those homes that could potentially be displaced in the coming months. So it's important that I point out a couple of things here. One is that, as you can see, it's the entire city of Detroit. There is no neighborhood that has not been touched. And this is really also a conversation about changing the face of foreclosure. So for instance, when you talk about people who are behind on their taxes, people assume that you're talking about low-income people of color, maybe in some of the most challenged neighborhoods in Detroit. And that is the case, but it's not the entire story. And so we're talking about Rosedale Park, Sherwood Forest, Indian Village, East English Village, as well as some of those more traditionally challenged neighborhoods. It's also white, it's black, it's low income, middle income, high income. This is something that is impacting people for a lot of different reasons. So in some instances, people's homes are completely paid off. They don't have mortgages on these homes. And yet, they are losing their homes for tax foreclosure. Some people have said, my taxes were always wrapped up into my mortgage. I never thought about my taxes before. There are a lot of folks who said, I got this house from a grandmother who passed away and an uncle who left it to me, and I had no idea that there were back taxes. Or I bought the house, didn't know that there were back taxes. So a lot of permutations as to sort of why people are in this situation. I think another really startling thing about this issue is that there are over 60,000 homes in the queue that are 1 to 3 years behind on their taxes, which means this could be happening next year and the year after and the year after. So right now, the Wayne County Treasurer's Office has sent foreclosure notices to essentially any property that's eligible for foreclosure, which is something they haven't done in the past. They've also sent notices back 40 years. So anybody who has had any legal interest in the property are receiving notices about this. So in the past, maybe they let a few folks off the hook, but this year, every single home that was eligible has gotten a notice. Next slide, please. So I want to kind of walk you through a little bit of what this looks like in the city of Detroit. So as you can imagine, if you have families that are losing their homes to foreclosure, they're going to leave those homes. And so what happens when people leave their homes? What happens? Squatters, scrappers. These foreclosures account for about 86% of the blight in the city of Detroit. And so here is an image of a house over a span of a couple years and what it does to the neighborhood. So can we hit the light for a little bit just so that you can see this clearly? It's like drum roll. All right, so this is a home in 2009. As you can see, people live here, right? Looks like somewhat of a stable neighborhood. Let's go to the next slide in 2011. So Maybe the house was set on fire, as you can see the grass is overrun. Let's show that same block in 2013. And so this is what a lot of neighborhoods look like in the city of Detroit. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's because people have lost their homes for various reasons. And so what we are trying to avoid is having this happen to more neighborhoods that are at risk for foreclosure. Next slide. So a few months ago, the Skillman Foundation reached out to the United Way for Southeastern Michigan and said, what are you doing about this crisis? And we have worked to fund organizations like the United Community Housing Coalition, who are on the front lines of this foreclosure work. But we also had no idea of the enormity of this issue. So we formed a coalition with Rock Ventures, Loveland Technologies, and the Skillman Foundation to essentially work to address this issue with both sort of likely and unlikely partners. So what we wanted to do was think about how to solve this problem a little bit differently. And so at the United Way, we use a methodology called human-centered design. And all it really means is putting the people who we're trying to create solutions for at the heart of those solutions. So as opposed to sitting around a boardroom talking about how we're going to work with people in foreclosure, we said, let's go talk to people who have experienced foreclosure and ask them what we can be doing. And so we wanted to make sure that we not only interviewed people who are experiencing foreclosure, but we talked to the experts, we talked to the practitioners. And what we heard overwhelmingly is that when people show up at Cobo Hall, they feel defeated. And so there was a woman who said to me last year that she showed up for this event, and she was scared and she was nervous, and her husband is in a nursing home, and she was doing this on her own. She had never managed the taxes before and had no idea if they were even in foreclosure. The same woman showed up to the event this year, and she said, and I literally wrote this down on a sticky note, she said, thank you for treating us like human beings. Last year felt like a slaughterhouse. And so what we've done in this process this year is really focus on treating people with dignity and respect through this process, and really essentially kind of holding their hand and walking through this process to make sure they get the help that they need. Next slide. So we're kind of focusing on a couple things. It's to enhance the user experience for folks. People are sitting in Cobo Hall and WC3 for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. I don't know about you, but I don't remember the last time I had to sit anywhere for 8 hours and wasn't necessarily treated with dignity and respect. We also have recruited over 500 volunteers from across the region to support the Wayne County Treasurer's Office. And for all intents and purposes, I've become a triage, tax foreclosure helper, right? And so over the past few months, I've learned as much as I can about this issue. And we're talking to people and saying, do you need to be here? What does it mean for your home to be in tax foreclosure? And so for those of you who may not know, that's anybody whose taxes are delinquent from 2012 or earlier, okay? Some folks they don't even know that their taxes are as behind as they are. There are people whose taxes are delinquent for 2013, delinquent for 2014, and those people are in bad shape as well, but it's those folks whose taxes are 2012 or earlier who are at risk of foreclosure. And so we're making sure that the folks who need the most immediate help can get that, because on March 31st, anybody whose taxes have not been paid, or if they've not signed up for a payment plan or made some sort of resolution, those homes will revert back to the ownership of the Wayne County Treasurer's Office. And then lastly is, for the first time in history, we've been collecting data on the people who show up to Cobo Hall. So every year we say, oh, maybe there's 1,000 people that show up. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know why they're coming. So we partnered with Loveland Technologies to essentially not only capture data on all of these folks, but to gather some insights. And so we think about this as sort of like peanut butter and jelly, right? The quantitative data is telling us a lot more than we ever thought we'd find out. So for instance, we know that right now about 85% of the people that are showing up are owner occupants. These are people who live in their homes, own their homes, and want to stay in them. For instance, we've also found that about 5 to 7% of the people who are showing up are renters. If you are a renter and you don't know that your landlord hasn't been paying the taxes, that's a big problem, especially in a city with a population of over 70% renters. So we're also trying to find some resolutions for those folks because they have far fewer options than those owner occupants. We've also found that about 30% of these homes have children in them. And we also want to make sure we want to make sure that they're not being displaced, having to transfer schools, having to move. That uprooting of a family does a lot for a community. And so I'm going to pull up a website. There should be a website open. So Loveland Technologies has created this website called whydon'tweownthis.com. This is information that is free and publicly available and accessible to each of you if you are interested. And so essentially, a few months ago, they worked with Rock Ventures and a few other partners to do a major blight mapping project of the city of Detroit. Every single parcel in the city has been mapped and color coded. And because this information was available, we layered the tax foreclosure data on top of this. So now every house in the city of Detroit, not only do we have a picture of it, but we have a snapshot of what their tax status is. So if you go to Detroit, and I'm showing you this because I want to make sure that you all know that you can use this. Whether you are a neighborhood association or an organization, you can access this information. So this also kind of shows that map that we showed earlier. There's a little search bar here that we're going to click onto. And we're going to put 14079 Rosine. So this is actually the street that I grew up on. This is the home of a childhood friend. The family has lived in this home for over 30 years. Father used to work for General Motors, was laid off a number of years, is now disabled, and there are probably a number of reasons why this family's home is in tax foreclosure. So as you can see, there is a picture of the home. They call this blasting, where there were surveyors going around the city taking pictures of every single house, updating it into the system in real time. So if you scroll down, it'll show you a little bit of information about the property, and we're going to click on the Show Tax Status button. And what it'll show you is that this particular home is subject to foreclosure for 2012 taxes and delinquent on 2013 taxes. And as of March 1st, if they haven't paid their 2014 taxes, 2014 will also be delinquent. And essentially what we're doing with every single resident that shows up to Cobo Hall or Wayne County Community College is first kind of walking them through this process. There are many people who have no idea why they're in foreclosure, how much they owe. So if you have residents or folks that you're working with in the community and they have questions about their property, you can absolutely access this database. A really important tool, or an important way that we're using this tool, is that anybody who calls United Way's 211 call center or comes to Cobo Hall or comes to WC3, we're going to be essentially mapping that information to that house. So for the first time ever, we'll know that Rebecca Thompson called 211 about this property on this date. We'll be able to get some information from them. We're gathering demographic information, income information, and essentially what that allows us to do is to help better serve them. With no idea of who these folks are and what resources they need, it's really a challenge to figure out how you help 62,000 households. And so our hope at the end of this project is that we'll be able to come back to the county treasurer's office with all of this data and insights and tell the story. So the last piece, if you want to go back to the PowerPoint slide, is I talked a little bit about kind of the peanut butter and jelly. There's the quantitative data, which is really important, but there's also the qualitative data. And this is kind of a little funky, but this is really about telling the stories of people who have experienced foreclosure. So we created a website called BecauseSomeoneLivesHere.com, and this is a snapshot from the Facebook page. And essentially, we have people sharing their stories. And it is, I will tell you, I've worked at the United Way for the past 3 years. I have never worked on a project that has touched me in this way before. I am seeing family members at these sessions, childhood friends, former teachers. This is literally, people from every snapshot of my life. My mother has lost 2 homes to foreclosure, so this is absolutely personal for me. And so we wanted to make sure that we could help put a face to these stories. And so if you go to BecauseSomeoneLivesHere.com, people can upload their stories. They don't have to be at the tax foreclosure events to share them. But we also have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter handle. And so all of those qualitative stories, all of that quantitative data, we will be putting in front of community leaders and funders and the Wayne County Treasurer's Office and all these partners in a few months to say, here's what foreclosure looks like in Detroit, and here's what we should be doing to solve this problem over the long term. So I'll stop there, and if folks have any questions,